Welcome back. In the last lesson we set up the shader for our extended ocean surface, and now we will take a look at the whitewater. So here we have our whitewater import already assigned with the spray material, but first let's dive inside here and make sure that we load the simulated cache of our whitewater. So let's drop down a file node here and make sure you point it here to your cache folder with the whitewater $f$bgo. Okay, so we can disconnect, or we can just move the import whitewater up and connect to the attribute wrangle here our cached whitewater. So we won't simulate when rendering, we will load our already simulated cache. Okay, very good. Now you can also see it here. Make sure that you have show all objects here so you can better judge it how it looks together with our boat. And now let's take a look at the nodes which are pre-set up here. So we have this attribute wrangle with some options to do post-simulation tweaks for the p-scales, so the scale of the individual particles and the velocity. And down here is a volume rasterize node. This node basically takes an empty volume, which you can define here, and then it will rasterize all the points. So basically it will convert every point into volume and then merge them together. So here you have also several options for example, a velocity blur. So the motion blur will be added already inside the volume, and also the density scale and the particle scale again. So in this case we will leave these values here as they are, because we will use the values on the volume rasterized particles itself. But what we are also going to do is to drop down a point replicate just to get a few more points. Because in the end we could also increase the particle scale, but that would give us a different look than using a point replicate to offset the new generated points a little bit. So basically with this node we add a bit more detail which is not in the simulation. So let's connect it here. Also in the viewport, hit the D key. On the geometry tab, select the point size 1 so you can better judge it. Now it looks much better here, okay. And before you click here on the point replicate, disconnect it once more, because normally it's set to 100 points per point. That would multiply our amount here by 100, and it's already 21 million, so that would result in too many points. So let's change this points per point value here to 3. And here's also a hint: if you have simulated less particles than I have in this case here, so I have 21 millions. For example, if you have 10 millions or 5 millions, you can also increase this value here, the points per point, to get the feeling of more detail. Okay, let's take a look at the shape tab. We will use in this case the line, because we just want to offset all the points a little bit and not generate completely new shapes. So velocity stretch is fine, use the scaled option here, but with a low value 0.5, so we won't change the shape too much here. Okay, now you can connect it and display it. It takes a while, and now you can see that we filled up the gaps here pretty good. So if we disconnect it again and activate it here, you will see that we filled up the gaps here. Okay, very nice. And now let's connect this point replicate here to our volume rasterized particles. So display it, and now it will again take a while here to compute the rasterizing process. I noticed that it took too long, so interrupt the process here, because I think we need to activate one more option on our point replicate. Otherwise the p-scale attribute is missing, and then this node here computes really long. So interrupt the process here. Okay, we interrupted it now, and make sure that here on our point replicate and the attributes tab, the copy source attribute is activated, because otherwise some important attributes are missing for our volume rasterized particles. Now it will take less time to compute and will look correctly, because you can see here that the first try wasn't looking correct. So now it's done, just took a few seconds, and here we have our rasterized whitewater. For sure we will tweak the values up here. But first let's set up the rendering so we have a before and after, so we can see what each individual parameter is doing. Okay, jump back up to our out context. Let's duplicate the ocean mantra node here. Let's call it whitewater. Okay. And make sure on the objects tab here that we add our whitewater. We will keep these here as well just for preview purpose, so make sure you have your whitewater import here added, accept. Okay, very nice. And now let's switch to our render view. The camera is fine, and select the whitewater, and let's do a first rendering. So here it's rendering now, and we are also missing our boat, so let's add just quickly our boat here to the objects. And here it is. So at the moment we have the whitewater, but it's not really looking like whitewater, it's more like gray water in this case. So basically the shadow intensity is way too strong. Let's quickly take a look at the reference here again. I mean, we have some shadows in here, but mostly it's really blown out and it's scattering inside. So I think we need to reduce the shadow intensity really strong here. Let's take a look in our shader of the whitewater here. Let's jump to the spray shader and see which settings we have here. So we have a temperature tab, not interesting in this case. The noise we also won't use, but on the density tab we need to do some changes. So first, the density is way too strong as well here, so let's reduce it to 2. And also let's bring down the shadow density multiplier to really low value, 0.015. Okay. That already looks better, but still we have a really undetailed look. We have this big blobs here and it's really soft. So let's save a snapshot here and see what else we can do. Let's increase the smoke intensity here for now to 2.5. Now it's brighter and better matching the reference, but what's still missing is the detail we have in our simulation, but we need to set up the rasterizing correctly to make it visible. So let's jump back to our whitewater import. The rasterizer is here, save a snap, and let's see what we can do. So we have the density scale and we have the particle scale. At first, let's reduce our particle scale here drastically to 0.15. That also acts like a multiplier on the P scale of our particles, so let's see how it looks here in the rendering. Okay, now that we have reduced the particle scale here, we don't see much of our whitewater, so let's do some more tweaks here. At first, let's take a look at our VDB. Because at the moment it automatically has the voxel size of the simulation. But to get more detail out of it with the reduced point scale, we need to bring down the voxel size so our volume has a higher resolution. So let's break the connection here and interrupt the rastering process so we can bring it down here to 0.011. Now again, do middle mouse button on the rasterizer so it calculates again. For sure it will take a bit longer now to calculate, but it's not much and it can create more detail now. Okay, also let's push the density really high here. So we have small particles but with a high density, so we have somehow a sharp edges here. I mean, they shouldn't be completely sharp, but they need to be way sharper than it's here at the moment. And don't forget that we also have the mist in the end, which will be added on top to give it back a smooth look, but inside we need this defined volume. So let's push the density scale to 40 and also change here the filter to Catmull ROM. Okay, let's also lower this value a bit because of our really low particle scale, and now let's re-render. So save a snap and hit the render button. So now it's rendered here with a new look. That already looks much better. If we compare it to our previous snaps, that's definitely the best one. We have all the detail here which we had in our simulation, so that looks really nice. And we have some shadows in here, but not too strong. That looks good. Another approach would be to also render the points separately, so to have one rendering with the rasterized particles and another one with just the points and a normal shader, so we get a few reflections here. But in our case we will keep it here with the rasterized particles, just that you have an idea if you need more specular highlights in here. Okay, very nice. We have our rasterized particles with a point replicate. Remember, if you have simulated less points, you can adjust here on the point replicate the points per point, or also you can play with the particle scale and density scale values here. Last but not least, let's create a null object here, so to make sure that we always render this one here, set the render flag with a control click here, and let's call this here render. So basically that's it for our whitewater. We tweaked the look here so it matches the reference, and in the next clip we will take care of the mist. See you there.